I didn't see the flames myself, but I have stared into the darkness of the reports. The records still speak to me. March 10th, 1945, 2 a.m., in Tokyo's Nihonbashi district. I can almost feel the pencil vibrating in the emergency coordinator's hand. He was trying to log words that would haunt generations of survivors. The rain is on fire. The very air we breathe has become flame. Through the emergency station window, he witnessed a horrifying truth. It defied 4 years of determined Japanese military propaganda. Glowing embers fell from American B-29 bombers, showering down like silver snow. Each one blossomed instantly into pools of liquid fire. That fire flowed across streets, climbed stone walls, and leapt between buildings with a supernatural, terrible persistence. These M69 incendiary bombs filled with napalm created temperatures of 1800 degrees Fahrenheit. That heat was enough to boil canal water. It generated its own localized weather systems of death. In the Shitamachi district, over 1 million souls were packed into wooden and paper houses, 103,000 per square mile. The Americans had just unleashed what history would record as the deadliest air raid ever conceived. 279 Boeing B-29 Superfortresses were involved. They were part of a larger force of 325 that launched that evening. To maximize the payload, they were stripped of defensive guns. They dropped 1,665 tons of incendiaries onto a 3-by-4-mile rectangle of Tokyo. That payload held 500,000 individual M69 bomblets. The entire population of Japan's capital had been assured of safety. Their government promised American bombers could never reach them. Even if they did, Tokyo's firefighting brigades, they were told, could handle any threat. None of them knew this moment would trigger the most profound psychological transformation in Japanese history. It was a systematic demolition of every belief they held. Their faith in American capabilities, their own national invincibility, and the very nature of modern warfare were being incinerated. The mathematics of Japan's destruction were being written that night. It wasn't written in military defeats on distant islands. It was written in rivers of liquid fire flowing through the heart of their capital. Temperatures turned human bodies to ash in mere seconds. It was written in production statistics from American factories that soon revealed the true, grinding hopelessness of their cause. The collapse had truly begun months earlier, though few in Japan recognized it yet. By late 1944, the B-29 Superfortress had become operational. It flew from bases in the Mariana Islands, Saipan, Tinian, and Guam, captured after brutal fighting that summer. These islands, only 1,500 miles from Tokyo, brought Japan's home islands within range. Among those preparing for the coming storm was Major General Curtis LeMay. He assumed command of 21st Bomber Command on January 20th, 1945. LeMay was a veteran of the European bombing campaign. He inherited a precision bombing strategy that was failing spectacularly. High-altitude bombing from 30,000 feet had achieved less than 5% accuracy. Why? The Americans had just discovered a meteorological phenomenon, the jet stream. Winds reaching 250 miles per hour scattered bombs miles from their targets. The B-29s themselves were technological marvels. Each cost $639,000, the equivalent of $11 million today. Yet they suffered chronic engine failures at high altitude. The Wright R-3350 engines, the most powerful aircraft engines ever mass-produced, had a disturbing, deadly tendency. They would catch fire during the long climbs to bombing altitude. By January 1945, more B-29s had been lost to mechanical failures than to actual enemy action. But the first real shock to Japanese assumptions came from an unexpected source: American chemistry. At Harvard University, a team led by Dr. Louis Pfizer had been working since 1942. Their task was specifically designed for Japan. They knew 90% of Tokyo's buildings were wood, bamboo, and paper. Traditional incendiary bombs filled with magnesium or thermite burned intensely but briefly. What Pfizer created was something entirely different. It was a sticky, jellied gasoline. It would adhere to any surface and burn for up to 30 minutes. The formula was simple, deceptively so. Aluminum salts of naphthenic acid and palmitic acid mixed with gasoline. They called it napalm, taken from the first syllables of naphthenic and palmitic. When Pfizer completed the formula on February 14, 1942, he had created one of the most feared weapons of the 20th century. Standard Oil Development Company, working with the Office of Scientific Research and Development, had actually begun developing the M69 delivery system in October 1941, 2 months before Pearl Harbor. American war planners had long anticipated the need to burn Japanese cities. The revelation of American capabilities began not over Japan, but in the harsh Utah desert. At Dugway Proving Ground, the U.S. Army built exact replicas of Japanese neighborhoods. They used tatami mat floors, sliding paper doors, and the precise wood found in Japanese construction. German architect Erich Mendelsohn, a Jewish refugee, was hired to ensure every detail was accurate. The tests conducted throughout 1943 produced data that should have terrified Japanese leadership. A single M69 incendiary cluster, weighing just 500 pounds, could reliably start fires across a 2,500 square foot area. The napalm gel would splatter on impact, throwing burning globs up to 100 feet. Most critically, water would not extinguish it. The burning gel would simply float on the water and continue burning, rendering traditional Japanese firefighting methods utterly useless. Lieutenant Colonel Robert McNamara, then a statistical analyst for the Army Air Forces, crunched the numbers. He calculated that 68 Japanese cities could be completely destroyed with the B-29 force available. His analysis, presented to LeMay in February 1945, showed the path forward. Switching from high-altitude precision bombing to low-altitude incendiary attacks could increase destruction efficiency by 500%. The Japanese, meanwhile, remained dangerously ignorant of these preparations. Colonel Shigao Nakajima, head of Tokyo's air defense, later admitted, "We believed the Americans would continue high-altitude daylight precision bombing as they had in Europe. The possibility of low-altitude night incendiary raids was never seriously considered." February 25, 1945, Tokyo. The first major incendiary test arrived without warning. 231 B-29s dropped 453 tons of incendiaries on a 1-square-mile section of Tokyo. They destroyed 28,000 buildings and killed 3,000 people. This was merely LeMay's experiment, testing if Japanese air defenses could handle low-altitude attacks. Police photographer Koyo Ishiawa, documenting the damage the next morning, noticed something unprecedented. The fires had not simply burned buildings, they had created their own terrifying wind systems. Immense incandescent vortices rose in several places, he recorded, sucking whole blocks of houses into a maelstrom of fire. The Japanese military response revealed fatal misconceptions. General Masakazu Kawabe, deputy chief of the Army General Staff, dismissed the raid as mere harassment. He assured Emperor Hirohito that Tokyo's 8,000 firefighters, organized into neighborhood brigades, could handle any American incendiary attack. The government distributed wooden buckets and sand to civilians. Housewives practiced beating out flames with wet mops during daily drills. but nothing prepared them for the intelligence network that guided American targeting. Japanese Americans, recruited from internment camps, were translating captured documents. They identified industrial targets dispersed among residential areas. Sergeant Ben Kuroki, who flew 58 combat missions despite his family being interned, later revealed the damning truth. We knew exactly where every small factory was, hidden, every workshop in someone's home. The Japanese thought dispersal would protect their industry. Instead, it gave LeMay the justification to burn entire cities. March 9, 1945, 5:35 p.m., Guam's North Field. The first B-29, nicknamed Dauntless Dottie, began its takeoff roll. Over the next 2 hours and 45 minutes, 325 superfortresses launched from 3 islands, Guam, Saipan, and Tinian. They were converging on Tokyo in the largest raid ever assembled. LeMay had made 3 radical decisions that transformed the mission. First, all defensive guns, except the tail positions, were removed, along with their gunners and ammunition. Second, the bombers would attack at night between 5,000 and 7,000 feet below effective radar detection and heavy anti-aircraft guns. Third, each plane would carry 40 cluster bombs containing 1,520 individual M69 incendiary bomblets, double the normal bomb load. The lead Pathfinder aircraft arrived over Tokyo at 12:08 a.m. on March 10th. It marked the target area with napalm bombs in a giant flaming X. The main force followed. They dropped their incendiaries in a calculated pattern designed to create a ring of fire that would trap residents inside. Tail Gunner Sergeant James C.R. watched the first bomb's impact. He recalled, "At first it looked like silver snow falling. Then each one erupted into a pool of fire about 10 feet across. Within minutes, thousands of these pools merged into rivers of fire flowing through the streets." The weather conditions proved catastrophic for Tokyo's residents. 45 to 67 mile-per-hour surface winds from the southwest. These natural winds, combined with the firestorm's convection currents, created what pilots described as solid sheets of flame leaping 300 feet into the air. As the bombers passed over Tokyo Bay, their crews witnessed something that defied their understanding of physics. The fires were creating their own weather system, a phenomenon scientists would later term a firestorm. Superheated air rose so violently that it created hurricane-force winds at ground level. This sucked oxygen from underground shelters and fed the flames with fresh air. B-29 pilot Robert Morgan, who had previously flown the famous Memphis Belle in Europe, recorded his shock. At 5,000 feet, the thermal updrafts were so violent they threw our 140,000-pound bomber around like a leaf. The turbulence was worse than any anti-aircraft fire I experienced over Germany. The target area, the Shitamachi district, held not just dense residential housing, but thousands of small workshops. They produced components for Japan's war industry. The government had deliberately dispersed production after the 1942 Doolittle raid, believing this would protect it from American bombing. Instead, this dispersal gave LeMay the justification to target entire residential districts.
Radio operator Staff Sergeant Carl Barold monitored Japanese civilian defense frequencies. At first, there was organized chatter, fire brigades coordinating responses. Within 30 minutes, he heard panic, then screaming, then utter silence. One by one, the radio stations went dead. The firestorm's intensity exceeded all predictions. Temperatures reached 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit in the fire's core, hot enough to melt glass and aluminum. The Sumida River, where residents fled for safety, began to boil. Asphalt streets liquefied, trapping those attempting to flee. By 2:30 a.m., 2.5 hours into the raid, the destruction had achieved a scale that shattered Japanese understanding of warfare. Police records later documented attempts to coordinate evacuation. One district commander reported, "We had drilled for conventional fires that spread building to building. This was different. The fire was everywhere simultaneously. It fell from the sky, flowed through streets like water, jumped across fire breaks we thought were impossible." The most devastating blow came from the behavior of the M69 bomblets themselves. Each one, upon impact,
shot burning napalm up to 100 feet horizontally. It coated everything in sticky fire that water simply couldn't extinguish. Firefighters watched in horror as their hoses merely spread the burning gel. Dr. Kubota Shigenori, head of a rescue squad, recorded observations that challenged basic physics as Japanese understood it. He wrote, "The heat was so intense that people burst into flames without being touched by fire. Their clothes would suddenly ignite from radiant heat. We saw families fleeing, thinking they had escaped, only to combust spontaneously 50 meters from the flames." The American bombers, meanwhile, experienced their own revelation. Bombardier Lieutenant John Sauer watched his instruments. He observed, "The thermal column was so powerful it registered on our altimeter. We were supposedly at 5,000 feet, but the heat was pushing us to 7,000, even 8,000 feet. The entire city had become a blast furnace." As dawn broke on March 10, 1945, the scale of destruction defied comprehension. Reconnaissance photos taken by F-13 aircraft showed 15.8 square miles of Tokyo incinerated. The images stunned American photo interpreters. Entire districts had simply vanished, not damaged, not burned, but completely erased from existence. Police reports captured after the war documented the immediate toll: 83,793 confirmed dead, though authorities admitted many bodies had been completely consumed by fire. 267,171 buildings destroyed. Over 1 million people were homeless. But the numbers failed to capture the psychological impact. Tsuchiya Masako survived by submerging herself in a water tank. She emerged to find her entire neighborhood gone. She recalled that there were no landmarks, no streets, just gray ash as far as I could see. I couldn't find where my house had been. Everyone I knew was dead or missing. The breakdown of civil authority was immediate and complete. Tokyo's fire department ceased to exist within an organized force within 2 hours. Of 8,000 firefighters, over 1,000 died that first night. The equipment proved utterly useless against napalm. In the following days, Tokyo faced a profound crisis. The government had no contingency plans for casualties on this scale. Makeshift morgues filled schools, temples, and parks. Bodies were stacked, awaiting mass cremation. The psychological impact on survivors proved devastating. Yoshika Hashimoto, searching for her mother, described scenes that challenged human comprehension. She said, "The bodies were all black, shrunken to the size of children. You couldn't tell men from women, adults from children. Some were fused together in embraces. Families who died holding each other." Emperor Hirohito, touring the destroyed areas on March 18th, was visibly shaken. His aide, Marquito, recorded his words. His Majesty stood silent for a long time, then said, "Tokyo has become a burned field. The capital of the empire has become a burned field." Yet this devastation failed to change Japanese military strategy immediately. The government ordered increased production of bamboo spears for civilians, preparing to repel the anticipated American invasion. Information about the raid's true scale was systematically suppressed. The systematic destruction of Japan's cities followed a carefully planned schedule. On March 11th, while Tokyo was still burning, 285 B-29s struck Nagawa. The Mitsubishi engine plant, which produced 40% of Japan's aircraft engines, took direct hits from 1,938 tons of incendiaries. Factory worker Tanaka Hidoshi watched from a hillside as his workplace vanished. He said, "The Americans dropped fire in perfect patterns, like farmers planting rice. Each bomb created a square of fire, and the squares merged into an ocean of flame. In 20 minutes, factories that took years to build were gone." The industrial logic was relentless. Osaka, Japan's second-largest city, received 274 B-29s on March 13th, destroying 8.1 square miles. Kobe, the major port, lost 7 square miles on March 16th, including Kawasaki submarine yards. The precision of American targeting revealed an intelligence network the Japanese hadn't imagined. Small workshops, hidden in residential areas, were systematically destroyed.
Post-war investigations revealed American intelligence had mapped Japan's entire industrial infrastructure. By April 1945, the cumulative firebombing was producing what military psychiatrists termed spiritual collapse. Secret police reports documented increasing defeatism. Lieutenant General Noru Tazoi, responsible for air defense, admitted in a post-war interrogation, "After the March raids, I knew we could not win. The Americans could destroy any city at will." The most devastating blow to Japanese morale came from American leaflets. These warnings, initially dismissed as propaganda, began accurately predicting which cities would be destroyed next. Dr. Masao Maruyama, a political scientist, wrote, "The leaflets destroyed our concept of death in battle. This wasn't warfare. It was scheduled extermination. We were not defeated, we were processed." The statistics of the expanding campaign defied Japanese comprehension. By May alone, American bombers destroyed 94 square miles of urban area. June saw another 89 square miles incinerated. By July, B-29s were running out of targets. On May 29th, 517 B-29s struck Yokohama, escorted by 101 P-51 Mustang fighters operating from newly captured Iwo Jima. American fighters over Japan, something the military had assured citizens was impossible. The August 1st raid demonstrated American productive capacity at its peak. 836 B-29s attacked 4 cities simultaneously. Toyama, an aluminum production center, suffered 99.5% destruction, the most complete annihilation of any city in the war. Individual testimonies reveal the human cost. Haruyo Nihei, 8 years old during the March 10th raid, fled with her family. The wind was so strong it lifted people off their feet. I saw a woman with a baby on her back burst into flames. The baby was screaming, then suddenly both were silent, just black shapes falling to the ground. She survived by pure chance. Her father threw himself over her as burning debris fell. They were buried under other bodies, shielded from the heat. I could hear people above us praying, screaming, then nothing, she recalled. When we finally crawled out at dawn, we were covered in the melted fat of those who had protected us. The trauma persisted for decades. Shizuyo Takuchi, 14 during the raids, described lasting effects. "For years, I couldn't light a match without shaking. The smell of grilled meat made me vomit. Orange sunsets triggered panic attacks. We survived, but we never really left that night." Medical responses exposed profound inadequacies. Dr. Shigananori Kubrota documented injuries beyond medical experience. He said, "We saw people whose lungs had been seared by superheated air. Others had been baked alive in shelters when temperatures exceeded 400 degrees. There was nothing in our training to prepare us for this." Nurse Takahashi Aiko, working at Tokyo Imperial University Hospital, recorded, "We ran out of morphine in the first hour, bandages in the second. By dawn, we were tearing up our own uniforms for dressings. The screaming never stopped." Behind the bombing campaign lay an intelligence operation of unprecedented scope. The Joint Target Group in Washington spent 2 years analyzing Japanese infrastructure using pre-war insurance maps and tourist guides. Japanese-American linguists recruited from internment camps provided crucial intelligence. Sergeant Roy Matsumoto revealed, "A diary from a dead soldier might mention his sister working at a hidden aircraft part shop. Every piece of information went into target folders." Meteorology itself became a weapon. American weather officers discovered they could predict optimal firestorm conditions, low humidity, high winds, and clear skies. The March 10th raid succeeded partly because meteorologists predicted the strong southwestern winds. Captain Robert Nelson, chief weather officer, later explained,
We knew those winds would turn individual fires into a single conflagration. We literally weaponized the weather. By July 1945, American firebombing had achieved its strategic objective, the complete collapse of Japanese civilian morale and industrial capacity. Over 8.5 million people were homeless. War production had fallen to 15% of 1944 levels. The nuclear attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki killed fewer people than the conventional firebombing campaign. Hiroshima's 146,000 dead and Nagasaki's 80,000 combined were less than the 330,000 to 900,000 killed by conventional bombing. But it was the combination, unlimited conventional destruction and revolutionary new weapons that finally convinced Emperor Hirohito. In his August 15th surrender broadcast, Hirohito referenced a new and most cruel bomb. But privately, he was influenced more by the systematic destruction. His aide's diary confirms. His Majesty said the American firebombing showed they could destroy Japan completely without invading. The atomic bomb simply made the destruction faster. The B-29 campaign represented the largest industrial undertaking in history to that point, costing $3 billion, more than the Manhattan Project. Boeing, Bell, Martin, and Fisher built 3,970 B-29s, each requiring 100,000 hours of labor. The logistical achievement matched the industrial power. Building airfields on Saipan, Tinian, and Guam required moving 11 million cubic yards of earth and coral. Admiral Suemo Toyota later admitted, "We couldn't build a single adequate airfield on islands we'd held for decades. The Americans built dozens on islands they had just captured while still fighting."
Tokyo on March 10, 1945, looked worse than Hiroshima after August 6th. The Japanese military's initial response to Hiroshima revealed their numbed acceptance of city-scale destruction. The atomic bombs provided efficiency, the destruction of an entire city with a single aircraft rather than hundreds. The decision to surrender was fundamentally shaped by the firebombing. Navy Minister Admiral Mitsumasa Yonai argued, "The B-29s have already destroyed most of our cities. The atomic bomb simply makes the destruction more efficient." War Minister General Korichika Anami, the strongest opponent of surrender, received intelligence that America had sufficient incendiaries to destroy every city and town in Japan. Prince Fumimaro Kunoe told Hirohito, "The American bombing has already destroyed Japan's ability to wage war. Continuing means not defeat, but annihilation." On August 10, 1945, Hirohito made his decision. "I cannot bear to see my innocent people suffer any longer." When occupation forces entered Japan, they discovered 40% of the urban area destroyed. Colonel John Montgomery, inspecting Tokyo, wrote, "There are areas of 8 to 10 square miles where absolutely nothing remains. Not rubble, not foundations, just gray ash. It looks like the surface of the moon." The firebombing survivors fought for recognition. Katsumoto Saoto established an archive of over 3,000 survivor testimonies. Haruyo Nihei, the child who survived under corpses, became a peace educator. Her message was clear: war is a child watching her mother burn alive and being unable to help. The trauma embedded itself in Japanese culture. Survivors reported lifelong phobias of fire, panic attacks triggered by sirens, and an inability to attend fireworks displays. The M69 incendiary bomb was a masterpiece of destructive engineering. Its genius lay in the delivery: 38 bomblets packed in an E-46 cluster that opened at 2,000 feet. The napalm gel, heated to 800 to 1,200 degrees Celsius, sprayed in a 100-foot stream, burning for up to 30 minutes.
The industrial mobilization required for the B-29 dwarfed Japan's entire war production. At peak, the Boeing plant in Wichita completed one B-29 every 90 minutes. The aluminum alone told the story. Each B-29 required 60,000 pounds of aluminum. The electricity required for this production exceeded Japan's entire national power generation. LeMay's decision on March 7, 1945, to switch to low-altitude area bombing was perhaps the war's most consequential command decision. He did it unilaterally. "I woke up at 2 a.m. with the solution," LeMay later wrote. "Strip the guns, fly low at night, carry only incendiaries." He knew the cost. LeMay expected court-martial if the raid failed. He personally briefed every crew. "We knew we were going to kill a lot of women and kids," he admitted in his memoirs. "But if the war had continued, millions more would have died in an invasion." It was simple arithmetic. Horrible, necessary arithmetic. The firebombing campaign fundamentally altered Japanese culture. The concept of mujo, impermanence, took on a terrible new meaning. Modern Tokyo's layout, with its wide boulevards, is a direct result of firebombing trauma. Robert McNamara later reflected on his role as a statistician. He said, "If we'd lost the war, we'd all have been prosecuted as war criminals." And I think he's right. We were behaving as war criminals. The firebombing campaign remains history's most destructive application of conventional weapons against cities. It succeeded through meticulous planning, overwhelming industrial capacity, and radical tactical innovation. But success came through deliberately targeting civilians. The architects knew they were killing non-combatants en masse, calculating that civilian deaths would force surrender. The numbers tell one story: 330,000 to 900,000 dead, 66 cities destroyed. The testimonies tell another: children becoming orphans in seconds, entire neighborhoods erased. The Japanese witnessed their assumptions destroyed by overwhelming fire. Fire that fell like rain, flowed like water, and consumed everything it touched until entire cities simply ceased to exist. History remembers war, but rarely remembers those who whisper in the dark.